there is.
Yeah.
There is. Record on this
Yeah.
computer. Yeah. Okay, so it's recording. Good. Um, okay, so let's begin with a very blank scene, and I'm going to access the lighting window first, going to window and then rendering and then lighting settings. And you have, is everyone like familiar with this layout? Is it good to work with this layout, or should I change it to the
This is
default
good.
one?
No, it's this one is good.
This is fine, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let us remove the skybox. Let me set it to none. It's gone, and then I go to the hierarchy, and then let me delete the directional light. Okay, good enough. So this is all blank and stuff now. Always make sure to create, like different folders for everything you're doing. So if it is materials, if it is models, make sure you make different folders. So I'm quickly going to create a folder called materials. Oh, sorry for the spelling mistake. Materials. Okay, yep. And then let's create something like red or another one. Let's call it blue. I'll just create two materials and assign separate colors. This is just using the basic standard shader that comes up that most of us use, and we'll be looking at it how to make it look good. So let me set it to red, and let me set the blue material to blue, kind of like this. And then let's create a 3D cube at the center. So whenever I create a cube, a cube would be, a 3D object would be created in the center of my scene window. As I reset it, and let me focus it on the origin. Let me make it like a huge, big platform. Let's 555. You see, it's all dark. It is not reflecting any light right now. And let me set the main camera to an angle like this. So you guys can set the main camera easily by just looking around at a particular angle or a specific angle, and then just clicking on game object, select the main camera, select the main camera. A lot of noise. Can I just mute your microphone, whoever is system it is coming from? Okay, so I'll just select the main camera here, and let me focus this main camera to a view like this. So what I'll do is I'll go to the game object menu and select align with view. So in this way, my main camera gets aligned towards the viewport direction I was looking at. So in the game view, I can see my cube like this. So next, I'd be creating another cube. I'll duplicate it and raise it to the top, and then just place it like this with some amount of big gap or something like maybe just a little gap below. So the reason I'm setting this little gap is I want the indirect lights to bounce off this plane, and then they will like reflect like in a like X-ray fashion, and then spread light all around, like all below this thing. So now let me just change the name to cube 1, and let me add a directional light. So when you're working with night scenes, imagine this is a night scene you are working on. This could have been a terrain with trees. You should always have a directional light with shadows turned off, and you'll need to set it to mixed mode. And put the intensity to something like 0.1 or maybe 0.05, like this. So I'll share a little amount of lighting should be there from the static directional light, and we can call it static light. So this is what we usually do for the night scene to look good. No shadows, maybe an intensity of 0.1, set it to mixed, and yeah, then let's create another light called spotlight, and then let's put it on top of this cube. Let's place it on top of this cube like this, or maybe just add a small amount of angle to this. Yes, and then extend the spot angle. Let's set it to 60. So you can see that the light is falling on top of it. Now, how do I make, like, most of us would, when setting up a scene, would like throw around lights like this, and then spend hours looking around. Why is this not looking good? How can this be better? Where are the shadows and all? So right now, since you are working with the default rendering pipeline, the shadows with spotlights will be supported. So it's very easy. I'm just going to turn them on, and set it to soft shadows. When working with night scenes, you can reduce the strength of soft shadows to, like, say, a value of 0.7. In this way, it gives a fake appearance that the light is that environment lights are coming up, and it is the shadow is diluted in the presence of other lights. So you can fake that effect. Now, let's move on to the lighting window. What can I do here? Let me check this real-time global illumination, and let me assign the sun source to, let's leave it like that. Let me increase the bounces to a value of 2. And check the real-time global illumination. In the bake, I'll check ambient occlusion, and then I'll increase the indirect intensity to a value of 1.5. And then let's bake it. Let's see what is happening. So it got baked. It's not very much brilliant. Now, let's try increasing the environment intensity. So let's go on and increase the intensity of the directional light, like to a value of 1.5. And then let's come to the lighting window. Set the bounces to a value of 3. 4 is a strong value. You're just if you set it to 4, the real-time bounces would just increase for the indirect lights, and it would just become heavier. So it's good to stay with a value of 2 and 3. And let's set up the ambient color. Yeah. So for night scene, a purplish ambient color would work well, like this, to a darker value, or maybe like this. And then we can go ahead and assign these materials. So now, to show the effect of indirect lighting on this thing, on these 2 cubes, I will just check the static checkbox for both of these cubes and set generate lighting big. It will just take some time. How many of you are working with night scenes this game then?
Nami.
Is there anyone working on night scenes?
Yeah,
You see a soft, you see a soft indirect shadow coming under this thing here, and it is like trying to look better than what was like previous. And then you'd see indirect bounce of the blue color on the red, on this red material. It has started to come up, but it is very less. To increase the reflection of the blue on the red, you just need to increase the indirect intensity, the indirect multiplier, and set the spotlight to mixed. Yeah, set the spotlight to mixed, and let's set it to 2.
Aditya, I wanted to ask a question here. So, the tweaking around these
Yeah.
values, is there any specific documentation on YouTube anywhere for these values?
No.
The
You
conditions are used.
you won't find you won't find a specific documentation on these values. Like, but this is not experimental as well, I would say. So this is something that is coming from the most of the game industries I've worked with, or like most of the designers. They prefer this kind of setups to make this stuff look good. So in the next step, I would show you how to even make it better. You can see that is the screen totally clear? Is it not having any kind of network stream glitches or something?
No, it's pretty.
Then you can see the okay. So you can see these soft shadows on top, and now as the light is being baked, you can see a soft shadow under this thing, this occlusion that is coming in. So this is happening from this ambient occlusion checkbox, and the indirect bounce is also working, which is coming from the real-time global illumination, which immediately makes everything better. And once the bake is finished, I'll just move on to the next step. I'll just reduce the size of my light map next time. Finalizing the bake. And there we go. It is sharp, the ambient occlusion is there. Then there is some little blue like shattering over here. It's because the reflection is less. And how to make it spicy? Let's add some emission to red. Whenever working with stuff in the night scene, you can prefer adding emission to the materials, and it instantly just brightens up the mood. Instantly brightens up the mood of your scene. For blue, let's add some something like this. So next time when you bake, the scene would change. There would be more indirect bounces, and that is why we are baking this thing out. Now, let's make stuff look better. Let me select these things, and let me imitate multiple stuff here. I won't be preferring a static bake as I'm putting multiple stuff around. These are simple tricks you can work with, like working with the emission values. And is there anything that you want to share personally that you have found with the values of lights and materials in Unity? Is there anyone who would like to share their own views? They're totally welcome.
I've never personally tweaked around the lightings much until date because I was not sure about getting.
Okay, you have not. Okay. So this is for the nerds actually. So I'm saying it for the programmers only. So this is something how programmers' art can be like made better. So now this looks dull. Whenever working with night scenes, turn on your fog, check your fog, and increase it to an intensity of 2, and then change the color to like the mood of the scene. If you're, so it all depends on the story. So if you're working on a dark, scary night, set it to purplish, like this. And let's increase the spotlight intensity. 5%. Yeah, let's keep it to 6 and multiply 3. Static. I'm willing to change the rest of all the cubes to not static. That would just take the bake time. And about use of reflection probes. If you set a reflection probe on this cube and make it reflect tough, then this cube would receive its reflection. So this cube, if you put some like smoothness value to it, and this cube is within the bounding box of this reflection probe, so the light from this cube would be reflected on top of this. That looks really better. Isn't real-time GI expensive? Yes, it is, but you can use it. It's totally up to you. Real-time GI, if you're targeting a platform like a PC or a console, for sure you can use real-time GI with lower resolution of the light map settings. Like set the samples. You can see that.
Aritra, we can't hear you. Are you speaking anything? Hello.
I think his.
I'm
internet
sorry,
was-
the voice got cut. Yeah. It is, but sweet values can be found in settings. That way we can optimize the thing. Yeah. So what I would say is you can reduce the indirect samples. So when working with real-time GI, if you want to reduce the like pressure on your like CPU, you can just reduce the indirect samples and reduce the environment samples as well, and keep it to a value of like 64 or 128. This. So now if I hit generate lighting, it would definitely look a bit better. So use fog, use emission, use the smoothness parameters. It is all in how you set up the materials. Can you see the ambient occlusion and indirect bouncing being baked? This thing. This is not complete yet, but you can see how smooth the lighting is now. And then you can use a reflection probe or something. Then you can have like when you're making for mobile games, you just turn off the real-time GI and bake everything. Try to bake every light possible to make it look good, and keep one real-time directional light to add shadows and stuff. So we'll see that. We'll see a small post-processing scene, and we will also learn to set up the URP. Many of you learn to set the URP by yourself from the scratch. Like it's totally okay if you have never done it. It is totally okay. Just let me know. In that case, I'll just extend the content.
If I say I did it, like, will it matter?
I haven't worked with light.
No, other than Kavindra, and anyone else tried the setting up URP from the scratch?
URP? No.
Yeah, the universal render pipeline. No. Okay, so we'll see. Just to like please my OCD, I'll just add some smoothness value to it, increase the metallic parameters, and add a reflection probe to this cube. And let's add a reflection probe quickly. Okay, let's add a reflection probe. And you see, if I increase the bounding box to say 20, like 30 or like 30, and then offset the box to like this. Oops. If I keep the box like this, now this thing, this cube or the object which is having the reflection probe should not be affected by the reflection probe. This is a general rule. You can ignore it, but this is the general rule. So how to make it like ignore the reflection probe reflection? I have just added a reflection probe on this cube, and I don't want it to be affected by the reflection probe. So what I'll do is create a new layer. I'll go on add layer and create something like reflection ignore. And then I'll come back to this cube and I'll select both of these and mark them in the layer reflection ignore. I'll put them in the layer reflection ignore. And then coming to my reflection probe, you see there is a clear flat, there is a culling mask property. Oops. There is a culling mask property that you can set, and let's uncheck reflection ignore. Rest for all other cubes, like this. Select everything. Yeah, select everything other than the 2, and let's mark it. Reflection probe. Hold on. Let me put something bright up here so that you can see the effect. Let's mark this as default. Yeah, let's mark this little cube as default. I just put the layer of default because this would be our reflection source. And let's brighten the blue. Like this. And for all other cubes, I'm just going to select them and mark them as reflection probe static. So what this would do is, this cube, which is having the reflection probe, with taking the reflection from all of these dark cubes. This cube with the reflection probe will reflect. So see, the point is, whatever you mark as reflection probe static would be reflected onto the reflection probe, because the reflection probe is nothing but 6 cameras placed together. So this is one camera looking forward, then you have camera looking upwards, red, blue, and you have like a bunch of, like cameras looking outwards in 6 directions of the cube, in the 6 faces of the cube. And so that camera is going to store the information of the light reflected, of the smoothness values reflected from all of those objects that are like having the reflection probe static checked. So now if you just bake this thing, you can increase the intensity of reflection here. Impotence and intensity values you can like change. Let's put it to 1.5, and please feel free to tweak these values. So you can already see that I am helping you understand which values you can experiment with, because the Unity editor is having a lot of like stuff, and sometimes people get scared like playing around with these values. So play around with this particular values and you'll definitely get a great result out of everything. So it is just baking this thing. For more clear results, you can just increase the smoothness values. But the point is, reflection probes, you can use reflection probes at a night scene to that will help you, like brighten up the scene at specific spots. It is not advice for water. You can see the change due to reflection probes. Can you see it? Can you see how suddenly everything just got bright and like it does look better. It does look better than the previous one.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So these are cool hacks or tricks that you can. Can you see one cool trick that I did? That the reflection, the light is reducing in a gradient way to all of this, and this is all coming from the bake parameters. And then due to the fog, due to the purplish fog, you can have a nice angle. That now, if you change the environment lighting source from skybox to gradient, this even becomes fun. Let's change the ground color to something bright, the equator to something like this, and the sky color to something like, let's make it night. Like this, something more bluish. Let's go on with this. You see, there is an instant change from where we started. Like from what we would do with normal cubes with like basic lighting parameters. This is the least we can do to set up the lighting properly. And the major takeaway for you from this little exercise is how to work with, like quickly set up reflection probes. Make sure that the bounding box is setting up the bounding box properly is very important, because the bounding box is where if you keep objects, stuff reflected from light reflected from the object you have marked reflection code static would be reflected on top of it, if it is within that bounding box. So right now, this bounding box is having all these cubes. So the light reflected from this cube, this blue cube, see, this light reflection from this blue cube is gradiently like dispersed on all of these cubes which are within the bounding box. And even that it is not set up properly. You need to raise the height. It is just like within, so you can just raise the height. So this spiced the whole scene up. Now, yeah, I have a question. What's your opinion for lighting and stylized scene? This is a very, very good question. And I would show you I'd like to show you a sneak peek of what I'm doing with, do we have time? Let's check. 8:40. I just discuss the URP quickly and then get back to you on this. I have something for you. Can you see my screen with the URP project?
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have all the time in the world. Yes, exactly. Even I have all the time in the world for you guys. So let me delete everything again. this is a boring task, delete. Directional light, delete. Okay. I hate all of these files here. So let me just delete, take it all and again delete. So it's gone. It's no more URP at all. It's still not gone. It's gone now. It's no more URP right now. And let's set a URP from right from the very beginning. Okay, guys, if you have not used URP before, this is the Universal Render Pipeline. And the Universal Render Pipeline is something which is going to provide you the performance you need for consoles, for mobiles, for PCs, for games you want to port into any platform. For games you want to port into any platform, for WebGL, and URP has some amazing benefits, as it helps to run the post-processing stack with fair bit performance on mobile devices and all. You can then use the shader graph. The shader graph is an amazing tool. Someone has asked, Vedang has asked, what's your opinion for lighting in stylized scene? And shader graph is the answer to it. Shader graph is the answer to it. Having proper shaders to interact with your light is very important for your stuff to look good. And then in stylized scenes, we have to focus on the ambient occlusion a lot. If I have time after this, I'll definitely show the game I'm working on and how I am planning to add those stylized tricks to it. So this is URP. What is the render pipeline all? I don't get it. What is the render pipeline at all? To understand it, you go to Edit, Project Settings, and then you see Graphics. When you go into the graphics thing, you see there's a scriptable render pipeline settings. So the scriptable render pipeline settings is controlling how stuff is rendered on your scene. How is the main camera going to behave? How is all of the lights in your scene going to behave? How is it? How will it render the depth texture? Will it work with other additional parameters that can be ignored during the rendering to increase the efficiency of it? Then how are lights going to work? Would it support shadows? Would it support cascades? Would it support shadows from other additional lights? All of these parameters are handled in URP. So right now you see there is no assigned render pipeline settings. So the first thing we would do in a blank URP project is create settings for the scriptable render pipeline. And to do this, what I'll do is create a folder, new folder called settings. And then within the settings, inside of the settings folder, let's go to rendering, and let's create Universal Render Pipeline. Go ahead. Let's go to create, then find rendering, then Universal Render Pipeline, and then we will create a pipeline asset which is using the forward renderer. Cool. And let's name it my first URP settings. By the way, just to let you know, I'm using Unity 2019.3.5 F1. So my first URP settings. And then in my first URP settings, I'm going to assign it to the scriptable render pipeline field. So stuff would be rendered. Right now, with no pipeline asset on my screen, and if I create a 3D cube or 3D sphere, my geometry is still rendered with the default render pipeline guys. So if you create a URP project and delete everything from the project and you have no settings assigned, no scriptable render pipeline assigned to it, because that is the whole point of doing it, then it is still being rendered from the default render pipeline. So there's no point in rendering this thing with the default render pipeline with no scriptable pipeline asset assigned. So what I'm going to do is I'll go to project settings, then drag the newly created my first URP settings, this thing, and drag it here. What changed? Oops, we know something has gone wrong. How do you fix it? The way to fix it is, edit. You'll find a lot of assets that won't be supported with URP Asset Store. You'll download materials that won't be supported on the URP because the shader that you are seeing, the default material shader, is from the default render pipeline is written on. Who's going to answer? The shader is written with
Universal render pipeline is
just make a guess.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, the standard shader is written with the CD program code. Let's see the chat first. How would you suggest to use default rendering? Yes, default rendering is when you are using it with the default render pipeline. Default rendering, I guess I would like really go for it when you're working with movie scenes. Basically, default rendering is a screen space rendering technique, and it renders the whole screen in layers. So it generates the ambient screen at first, and then what forward renderer does is it renders in fragments. You see, all the 3D objects are made of fragments, and we can see these fragments up here. This triangle can be a fragment. This wireframe triangle can be a fragment as well. This fragment is generated one by one. And for the shader graph to work properly, it's kind of a fragment shader. We need to work. It's better if you work with the forward renderer. And yeah, so how to fix this? How to fix this pink things when you bring up stuff on URP from the asset store? Nothing. You just go to edit, find this render pipeline thing, then you'll find universal render pipeline, then upgrade project materials to universal render pipeline materials, and click proceed. Now, since this is the default material will not get updated. So you will need to create another 3D sphere. Then only the default lit material would be applied to it. So it is like really dark. You see, it is usually dark from what we see on the default render pipeline, and it is because a lot of customizations, like lighting customizations and scene properties are missing. And let's create a material. Let's create the same scene again, maybe. Let's create the same scene we created. So I'll just go here and create another cube. And change the scale to 333 this time. Is it visible?
Yeah.
Is everything clear?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's put it like this. I just made a bigger one this time, maybe. Yeah. It has the fog enabled. It has the fog enabled from the beginning. Let's keep the lighting settings closed. And what I'm going to do is create a directional light. Directional light. And let's go to the settings one and let's check the settings. What does it say about lighting? It says the main light is a pixel light. And the main light, guys, is the brightest light in the scene. Brightest light in the URP scene is the main light. Does it cast shadows? Yes. what is the shadow resolution casted by the main light? Right now, the main light is the directional light. So if I create another directional light or a spotlight with lesser intensity than one, that would be treated, the one with the brighter intensity would be treated as the main light. So the main light casts shadows. It has a shadow resolution of 2048. Nice. What about the additional lights? What if you create other lights other than the directional light? Does it have shadows? No. You can turn this on if you want to have shadows from other lights you put in the scene. For now, I will keep it unchecked. What is the shadow distance? 50. So this itself is this is something it was already there on the graphic settings, but it is more handy for you now. The whole point of making the URP thing is it is written in HLSL codes. All these shaders are written in HLSL codes, which is a part of the OpenGL library, and it is more supportive of all the frameworks, all the platforms. Because the CG program and stuff was like more, like NVIDIA oriented. Like they were like more friends with NVIDIA, or more friends with proper dedicated GPUs. Then let's check the shadows. The shadow distance is 50. I need to turn on the shadows on the directional light to show you the setting. You see the shadow is pretty bad here. This is for mobile, right? How can you increase the setting when you're building for PC? Just set the cascades to 4 cascades, and it looks good. So what does 4 cascades do? It just split the rendering of the shadows into 4 cascades. So when you are using no cascades or one cascade, the shadows were like rendered without neat maps and at once. And now you do it in 4 cascades, it looks good. Do you use soft shadows? Yes, I do love soft shadows, so I'll make it soft shadow. And depth bias. If I alter the depth bias, you can see these little glitches and artifacts coming around the shadows. You can adjust these values to, normal bias and depth bias to reduce the artifacts in the scene. Let's keep it to a value of 0.1 and 1. Let's keep the depth bias to 1. And it's good. What is the post-processing stack at? Low dynamic range. I don't want low dynamic range for my PC. I want it to high HDR or high dynamic range. This is for my post-processing settings to work really good with the linear color settings. If you go onto File, Build Settings, and then go to Player Settings, you could have just opened it from Edit Player Settings as well, but I find it easier to open it from here. So you just go to Player, and you see the color space is linear. And with HDR and linear color space is an amazing combination. So right now it says that HDR rendering is required to use the high dynamic range. I'm going to turn on HDR. Where do I find this setting? If I change the post-processing grading mode, the tone map grading mode to HDR, let me check the HDR checkbox here in the quality. And there you go. I'm ready with HDR rendering. And let's set the anti-aliasing value to 2x. And guys, this thing is so amazing. You're having all this good graphics. We'll come up with the good graphics. It doesn't look good right now. But once we create all these good graphics in URP, you can just reduce the render scale on the game scene. If I just focus my main camera like this, and you have a parameter called the render scale, which you can reduce when working with mobile devices. See, when working with mobile devices, you can just keep the render scale of a good graphics game to 0.5. and it won't even matter because the screen size is less. So this is how Call of Duty Mobile looks good. And then you can put the render scale to like 2x to 1. And this is all of these values can be accessed from the script. So no worries on that. Do I have any questions till now? Oh, there is, I know, in the chat. What's a cascade? Okay, what's a cascade? How would I explain that to you? Cascade is like you threw a ball and it reached to a distance, and in the end of the distance, I'm standing there, I'm pushing the ball even forward. So it increases the efficiency of, like your throw. So if there is one person watching from the distance, he or she would see that the ball is going farther. So it increases the fidelity of the shadows, So
Okay.
Let's go on to the settings. You see 6.7%. It's the zero cascade. Let us reduce it. Let us see the changes. So let me just put more pressure on the zero bar. You see, if I am standing farther, this is me. This is Sai asking the question, and here is me standing farther. So if Sai throws a ball from here and I'm standing here, it would take a lot of time. It would like reduce the entire fidelity of the ball trying to cross this entire distance. So I come closer to Sai. Now I can throw it farther apart like this. You distribute. You basically distribute the quality with like multiple throws, you can say.
Correct.
And it is kind of like an analogy to understand that. That's not the proper way to understand it. Okay, and let's go to the main camera. Let's go to the main camera and let's see what we can do there. The post-processing is checked. So how do you add post-processing to it? Number one, we create an empty game object and call it volume. This is my global volume that would add post-processing to my entire scene. And I'm going to add a component called volume. This all comes inbuilt with the URP. There is no profile here, so I'm going to create another folder and call it volumes. And then within volumes, I'm going to right click. Oops, I have a habit of like slipping on the mouse, and create, and then volume profile. Find volume profile and let's name it global. Okay, so now you can see. Now you can see this thing on the inspector. You can work with. Let me quickly add this thing to the volume. I'll do it. Just drag this thing up here and down here. So you can see the mode is already global. So if this is not global, it would depend on trigger colliders. So when your main camera, look, if I set it to local, I would need a collider. It says add a collider to this game object to set the boundaries for the local volume. So when the main camera would enter that volume, this post-processing would be triggered with some amount of blend distance. I'll show it to you, but let's set it to global at first. And how to find sweet values for post-processing. Let us create some materials. Let us create some maps. And create the same material maybe. And let's call it blue. Let's call it red. Yes. Blue and red. Let's set the color to blue. So let's set the color to red here. Looks good. So the fog value is too much. That is why I'm like going it's used to that one. Okay, so this is the scene here, and let us add some smoothness value to blue, 0.6. That, like I told you, it's always good to add some emission. So I'll just add some emission value. And with red, and again add some emission value. This emission like really changes the entire mood of the environment. And let's work on the global post processing now. I do need a skybox to make it look good. So I'll create a quick material and call it sky. And let's change it to universal render pipeline, nature. Oops, yeah, skybox, procedural sky, yeah. And let's assign this procedural sky here. So right now you see that the environment lighting is coming from a skybox. I won't advise that.
Right.
I have to work with a gradient lighting. So well, when you're having a sky, it is not always like the sky here, right? So you're importing your own skybox, and to have better control on how light is getting reflected, take it onto you, change the environment lighting source to gradient just to make things look better, just to keep things under your control. For example, the sky is blue here, but I want the top thing to have a darker blue effect. I set it to this. And the equator color to something, let's increase the round color like this. And it is on auto generate. And then let's go to main camera, volume, and let's start working on our post-processing stack. And notice some sweet values I'm going to add override. Let's set the blue, which is one of my favorites for sure. I'll check the threshold and keep the intensity to 1. A very, very good, a very sweet value for Bloom is keeping the threshold 1.1 and then setting the intensity to 1.3 or 1.5. This is a fair amount of bloom, a sweet and a subtle amount of bloom that you want. If you look at the sunlight, you can see it. And let's add an override of color curves. Okay, before color curves, let's add lens distortion. Who is working on an FPS or a scene which is like having a third person or FPS controller? Who is working with an FPS controller for this jam? Please use distortion. I would love to see it. So if you add some lens distortion effect, let's go to the game window. And for this, let me just change it to be, okay, no, this layout is okay. Please work with the lens distortion if you're like working on an FPS or something. So if you set it to a value like minus 0.2, and then if you just look around with your main camera like this, you'd find a sweet, like stretch around the edges of the screen. You'll find a sweet, like stretch. And let's add an override of shadows. Let's add tone mapping. Let's add vignette. And let's also bake this thing. Take the directional light, put it to mixed indirect multiplier 2. We won't have indirect here because it's not like really supported for other lights. You can see that there is no real-time global illumination. That is the fun. That is the entire fun of this thing. There is base global illumination, which is the default thing. There is no checkbox for real-time global illumination in URP. And so let's just check this to static. Okay, guys, how many of you noted that light map static field has been changed to contribute GI? Did you know it? Did you notice? How many of you noticed it? This is something that a lot of people struggle with, and I came with this personal problem. You know, like people are like, where is the light map static? Yes, that is the same thing. Like, where is the light map static? So it has changed to contribute GI. Yes, exactly. So here Vivek Raman is saying he was looking for it too. Right. So this is the fun. You don't need to mark it as entire static. Just change it to contribute GI. So that is the entire point of doing the light mapping. It is contributing global illumination. That is the light from the indirect bouncing. And indirect here basically means light not from the direct source, light from the reflection from all of the stuff around in your world. And now, as it is the baking complete? Okay, yeah, it is complete. And the shadows are pretty bad right now. You can just increase the intensity, or like I messed the cascade values, I guess. So no cascades, no cascades. Keep it like this. Yeah. So now with the post-processing, let's add, the vignette is already there. So let's go into my game view. Let's focus my main camera here. This is, I think, a sweet sight for all of you. And let's add shadows. Sorry, vignette. Vignette, to add vignette, just click on this intensity and set it to a smooth value of 0.25. Don't add too much of it. A lot of people, a lot of devs, you know, like they go and like move, or some like this close, and it's not advised. Go in and add a subtle value of 0.25 or 0.3. This is a sweet value. This is a subtle value. You just want people to feel focused at the center of the screen. That is the point of vignette. And then add an override of, let's say, okay, I have already added it. It's color. No. It's where did it go? Color adjustments. Yes, color adjustments. So let's add a post-exposure value. Let's call it 0.2. 1.5. And in the lighting, there is a value called, where did it go? Ambient occlusion. Let's change it to open image denoise. And yes, keep it to Gaussian. Let's bake it. Are you baking? Yes. You can change the fog color as well, like we did earlier. Fog adds mood to your scenes. Fog, you can do a lot of stuff with the fog. Can you see the visuals changing right here? And the trick was post-exposure. And let's add some contrast to it now. Let's add a contrast of 32. And let's add another override. Oh, it's already added. The tone mapping. Let's put it to Academy Color Encoding System, or ACES. Do you see the change? You can clearly see all of the faces of the cube right now. Does it look good till now? Does it look good a bit? Yes, it does. Okay. And you can work with the shadows as well. Let's change it. Let's change the shadow color to something bluish. And then one of my favorites is add depth of field. let's add a Gaussian depth of field. Put the end as 100 and start as 15 or 30 or 40, 50. Just till it disappears. Just till this artifacts disappear. And let's just duplicate all the cubes. Let's just put this in. Duplicate it. Change the static parameter. Let's just duplicate it. Yeah. Just increase. You can use the snap settings. Snap settings will help you. Like add. Like snap movement. You just need to hold a control and do it. You can just open the grid and snap settings panel and change the move to a value of 1. So now when I use duplicate and control, it just snaps around. It's faster. It's kind of boring to watch me do this. Let's just do something very random. And then select the entire row and duplicate and expand. Does it look like I wanted it to look? It's still baking. It looks very scary right now. Let's just let's do it fast. Any questions on the chat? We are like 4 negatives. Yes.
I think as of now, just one comment. It looks like.
So this thing would get better. This thing would get better. Is this slide baking? Yes.
Nothing.
Can you change? Can you see the change of the lighting and the stuff coming up? So I haven't even added a reflection probe to make it look sweeter. It's just the default value. It's just working with the default value. But it is looking good. I mean, pleasing to the eyes. Let's change the smoothness value to like 0.8, like this. And then, like I told you, add a reflection probe. Reflection probe, and then increase the bounce. Put everything. Put the entire cube thing within that. Put the entire region within that. So the point of doing this is all these cubes which are not after reflection static would receive reflection from this reflection probe. It will just capture all the lighting in the scene. It will capture all the objects that are marked as reflection static. It will disperse light. Yes, a very nice practice. This is a small scene. When you're working with larger scenes, please make sure to have multiple reflection probes. Distribute reflection probes all around and make them in a position like extend one from right here. So in that case, the intensity out. Otherwise, the intensity would keep on decreasing as the distance increases. The intensity of the reflection is the maximum at the center. It decreases quite linearly. So now I'm just going to mark this cube as reflects, don't reflect. So let me just put this in don't reflect. and then mark the culling mask, uncheck the don't reflect here in the culling mask, and mark everything else, everything else as reflection probe static. What happens now? It starts baking, and where is you can increase the intensity to 2. You can see the change. Oops. So you can adjust these things right here. I'll put it to 1.2. I'm never pleased with the value of 1 or 1.1. So now comes the depth of field setup. How do you do that? Let's set the start value to 10, and the end value would be 20. Then again. I'm just enabling high sample radius for now. For how to decide when to use Gaussian or when to use bokeh. Use bokeh when you're working with multiple lights in the scene in the background. You want stuff to appear as a shape. But when you're focusing on something linear, bokeh is not advised. Like for this particular scene, I can use, like go on using bokeh. It would just spoil the, it is just spoiling the entire scene. Putting artifacts around. You can find the sweet value here. And then change the aperture. The aperture is the value of how much amount of it you want to take. The more you take, the less the bokeh. The less you take, the more. So put it to 8, 9, 10, and the focal distance to 7, 6. Does it look good? Are you pleased enough with this?
Yeah.
So, this is like small tricks that you can use. Yeah?
It's look awesome.
This looks much better now.
Okay, so these are kind of the little tricks that we can do, and you can see what values I was playing around with to come up with sweet results. It's not something very difficult. You just need to play around the values I just, like I was telling you about. Any questions yet? Any questions on this? Anything specific you want to know? I'm pretty much sure that I discussed not anything very new to all of you. It is just playing around with the existing Unity editor and coming up with good results. And then we also learned how to set up URP from the very beginning, from the how can we achieve a flat shading. Cool. So there is a hack for sure. If you are not willing to do the hard work, just reduce the smoothness value to like this. This is the not so hard work for this, but if you are going full stylized, create a new shader from shader graph. Oh, where is this? Oops. Oh yeah, I keep losing it. Yes, so I'm going to create a PBR graph. You can also create an unlit graph if you want. Let's go with a PBR graph and create maybe like the most basic stylized shader. And I'm going to create a new material with this. How many of you knew about this little trick or little like easy control? You would say just hold any shader, left click on any shader, right click, and if you create a material, then that material is generated with that shader. This is a shortcut if you're willing to do that. anyways, like this is right now the most basic stylized shader we can work with. I'm going to reduce the smoothness value. I'm going to reduce like this is like right now flat. Then I'm going to create a Fresnel node, and then plug it to the albedo. Plug it to the albedo, and the view direction, and set it to the here. You can also invert this if you want. So in case of stylized, you want to have an outline and something like that. So you can do it with a Fresnel or still not that flat. It's because you see you can still see on the view direction we can have the dark. Where it is dark, it is totally dark. Where it is bright, it is completely bright. Like this. It's changing with the like this is the most basic stylized or flat shader you can build. Is it convincing enough for you, or anything else you wanted? Is it convincing enough? This is the most basic stylized shader you can build for yourself right now with the shader graph. Now you can add color to that stuff. Let me just show you what I'm doing with my own personal project. How does the scene look? Like, how much do I get out of 10?
Just goes for a 10.
I'd still say 0. No, it doesn't. No, it's not 10. Say why. It's not 10. Say why. Because we are missing something, and it is a proper anti-aliasing technique. And let's change it to sub-pixel morphological or SMA. Now you would quickly see a change if I go to settings. I press CRP and change it to 4x or 8x, and then also change the volume value or the depth of field value to like 5. 5. Yeah. Now you can say this is 8 or 7 or 8. Oops. Yeah, it's good enough. Hey, thank you. So this is 10 years. Can you see how the shadows are changing and like it's getting affected and all? And I quickly built a like basic black layer with shader graph. So this is adding this cool effect of this black here. You can do some anime stuff with this thing, with multiple colors and all. Let me just change the screen. Again, we need to change the zoom, I don't like this app.
We can move to Hangouts, or we can move to Skype.
Yeah.
Skype.
My screen being shared? Yes, it is.
Are we done?
I'll just show a few things.
Sneak peek into his current project.
Can you see my Blender screen?
Yeah.
Who was asking about low poly? So this is something I'm doing for my personal project. I am I'm playing around with the ambient occlusion to make low poly really, really good. Let me just change it. I'm working with AO maps on Blender and then integrating it with Unity to exactly achieve this kind of view? Exactly. Can you see it? How does it look? Like how does the AO look right now? It is totally baked.
It's
So I'm trying to do this to port this into Unity. This is one. I'm the proper ambient occlusion and then making use of normal maps strictly, and then using a stylized shader can be a trick you all should, like you can follow. Anyways, how was the session like? Was it? I know it was nothing like very much new to all of you guys. As you guys are making games, you have already been doing good. How was it?
That's a pretty good
session was for
to the entire
yeah.
lighting sets. You are.
Was it decent? Interesting.
Yeah.
It was good. Okay, great.
For me,